Hey, this is Mrs. Weefy here for video lesson 2 on scientific thinking and processes. When we talk about scientific thinking, we're looking at using the scientific method, usually for inquiry. And so, what is the scientific method? It's the logical approach to solving a problem. What it is not is a step-by-step process. Um, it's not a cookie cutter recipe. You don't use the same steps in the same order every single time. The process depends on what the problem or the question is that's being investigated. But there are some aspects of the scientific method that are used every time, and one of those is observations. Now, observations is a collection of information using our senses or tools such as computers, journal articles, experimental data, people, animals. Anything that we can observe and collect information would be observations. Now, we can also have data as part of our observations. These are observations and measurements that are collected during an experiment. And we have two kinds of data. We have quantitative, which are your numerical measurements. Anything with a number like volume and mass and temperature are all quantitative data. We also have qualitative data, and that uses our senses to describe the observation. So, anything we can see or smell or hear are qualitative data. Now, two purposes for observations. One is the formation of a problem or a question. So you make these observations and you might find something that you have a question about, so you want to investigate it. The other thing is that you want to become an expert about the problem. You want to know everything there is to know about the problem, so you learn everything through observations. In addition to the purpose of an observation is the formation of an hypothesis, which is an educated prediction or a proposed answer to the question or the problem. Now, it is a testable statement. So when you see a hypothesis, you read a hypothesis, you should be able to very simply come up with a test, a way to investigate that hypothesis. It is written in an if-then. Now we're adding in a because part of the statement. You're probably familiar with the if-then, but because is a very important part of the hypothesis. The if is the testable part, the then is the prediction, and the because is the explanation to the prediction, the why your prediction actually occurred. Now, we test a hypothesis using a controlled experiment. So you test the hypothesis under controlled conditions. Now this is a cookie cutter recipe. It is a step-by-step process. Consists of an independent variable. The independent variable is the condition that is manipulated or changed by the experimenter. You are actually going to physically change the independent variable. The dependent variable, on the other hand, is the condition that changes because of the independent variable. Thus, it depends on what you are manipulating. The dependent variable is the then part of the hypothesis. This is the variable that is observed or measured during the experiment. The independent variable, on the other hand, is the if part of the hypothesis. So let's take a look at an example here. If the volume of a syringe containing a fixed amount of gas is decreased, so that's what you would do. You would physically decrease the amount of gas that you have in the syringe. So what's going to happen? Then the pressure of the gas will increase. We have the prediction. Because, and now the explanation, there is less space for the gas particles to move within the syringe, therefore increasing the collisions or the pressure of the gas. If, then, because. Another part of a controlled experiment is the actual control. So the control acts as a standard of comparison. It's basically the normal condition. It doesn't change. You need something to compare your variable to, otherwise you won't know if that experiment actually worked. We also have constants. Constants is everything in the experiment that has to stay exactly the same except for that independent variable. So all the same beaker size, the same amount of water, the same temperature for keeping temperature constant. I mean, the only thing that should change in your experiment is the independent variable, and then the dependent variable will change because of that. Now, during the experiment, we have data collection, which is the information that is used to either support or reject the hypothesis. And then once you collect that data, you have to analyze it. Draw conclusions, which is a judgment about the solution to the problem. And then evaluate the data. So if the data supports the hypothesis, then we're going to accept it. If the data does not support the hypothesis, then we reject it. If the hypothesis is rejected, then there's some things that we can do. We can restate the hypothesis. We can redesign the experiment. We can make more observations and start over. But the one thing that you would never do is just throw out the data. Lastly, you're going to publish the results. The purpose of publishing the results is to share with the scientific community so that they can repeat your work and validate your results. When we validate the results, we're saying that, this work is authentic, it's true, and you have solved the problem or answered the question. So if we repeat an experiment over and over and over again, that can lead to a scientific theory, which is an explanation to a wide range of observations or experimental results. Scientific theories explains a solution. It's the explanation to a solution or a problem. It's not always completely true because we have new technologies that arise, which then we have to revise the scientific theory. Now, over time, testing, our theory over and over and over and over and over again, and we find that it's true every single time, then we can formulate a scientific law, which is a description of the observations or the natural behaviors. It's always true, usually supported by a mathematical equation. Lastly, we can use representations of an object or an event through a model, like the structure of the atom would be a good example of a model, the atomic model. Okay, so this concludes our video lesson number 2. Until next time, this is Mrs. Wheathy. So long for now.